What is up, enthusiasts? It is Cedar Flags here, and welcome back to another one of my videos. So today we are going to be doing something that I haven't done in a while, a good old-fashioned list. And when I mean old-fashioned, well, I mean it quite literally. Today I'm going to be looking at an era of roller coasters that has rather been, let's say, forgotten. Today we are going to be looking at some of the oldest roller coasters that came out in the roller coaster industry, and rides that changed it forever. I truly believe that most of these roller coasters, especially the rides in the top 5, could never be built today with the safety regulations we have. This is Cedar Flags, and today we are going to be counting down the top 10 craziest vintage roller coasters. So, starting off with the number 10 spot, we actually have the only roller coaster on this list that was never built. As you can see, it goes up into an electromagnetic launch, which is very revolutionary for the time, and jumps the tracks and lands onto a water slide. The rest of the layout really isn't that exciting. It's more of a water slide than a roller coaster, but that one jump track feature is just really incredible to me, and I think that even though this wasn't built, it definitely should make the list. Coming into our number 9 spot, we have the newest and most recently defunct coaster on this list. It is the Wildcat at Idora Park in Youngstown, Ohio. This was one of Philadelphia Toboggan Company's earlier wooden coasters, and this ride took advantage of laterals in an incredible way. It had a very compact layout, and to say the least was probably one of the most fast-paced roller coasters of the time. Something really cool about this ride is that I have living family members that actually got to ride this on an annual family trip, and all of them say the same thing. It was wild, it was intense, and the lateral forces were second to none. At the number 8 spot, we have Virginia Reels, or Tickler roller coasters. I think the most interesting part of this ride was the extreme lack of restraints. Also, looking at some of the footage, the scenery looks absolutely beautiful, the ride was decorated very well, and they look like they're going pretty fast. I mean, I feel like this would have been more of a thrill ride than a family ride. I said that there were no operating roller coasters on this list that are operating today, but there is currently a smaller downsized version of the Virginia Reel still operating at Joyland Children's Fun Park in Great Yarmouth, England. But at the same time, this is a lot smaller, a lot more tame, and a lot more modern than some of the earlier examples of this profound model. The number 7 spot is definitely a prototype of its time. This was Bisbys Spiral Airship at Queens Park in Long Beach, California, the world's first of any coaster that went under the tracks. It opened all the way back in 1902 and closed around the mid-1910s. Now, looking at the renderings and looking at how banked the cars are, I feel like this would be an interesting ride experience and maybe even pull some great positive G's. And looking at how some of the cars are caged in, I could only imagine that this ride had barely any or no restraints whatsoever. For the number 6 spot, we go from the west coast all the way to the east coast to talk about the airplane coaster at Playland Park in Rye, New York. This ride opened around the same time as Dragon Coaster did, and it was where Superflight operates today. It was opened in 1928 and was designed by Frederick Church. Looking at the renderings and some of the off-ride footage, this ride looked incredible, and it looked like it had some of the greatest laterals out of any coaster out there. It was very fast-paced, and unlike a lot of coasters at the time, stayed very low to the ground, especially in the latter half of the ride. At the number 5 spot, we have a flat ride roller coaster hybrid called The Top. This was located at Coney Island in New York, and I mean, just look at it. Do I really have to describe why this was a weird ride? Now, when it comes to the thrill factor, it was definitely a lot smaller than some of the other rides on this list, but its presence is extremely interesting, because not just the train, but the structure itself moves like a top. Like I said, the forces don't look too amazing, but it would have been seriously incredible to ride something like this, to have the structure move alongside you, and for the train itself to move the structure along. For the number 4 spot, we go to a ride that is similar to a Flying Turns model. Now, if you don't know, a Flying Turns model was a very popular wooden coaster model back in the day. It was a bobsled model, and the craziest of them all operated at Palisades Amusement Park in New Jersey. This was the Lake Placid Bobsled. This ride went well over 100 feet at an astounding height of 125 feet. Even if this ride opened 40 years later, it would have still been considered one of the tallest roller coasters on the planet. And this drop on a normal roller coaster would be something. But the fact that this was on a bobsled coaster nonetheless, I can honestly not comprehend how this felt. After that first drop, it went into a helix, and like I said, I really don't know how this would have felt. So if I had a time machine, Palisades would definitely be one of my first stops. For the number 3 spot, we go to what is quite possibly the most intense roller coaster to ever exist, when it comes to stats including. So this is the Flip Flap Railway, which operated at Sea Lion Park in Coney Island. If you don't know, before the 1970s, when looping coasters became more common, there was a big experimental first wave of roller coaster inversions in the United States in the 1910s and 1920s. They were a lot less safe and a little too uncomfortable for people at the time. It pulled a max G-force of up to 12 Gs, which is, well, over twice the amount that many enthusiasts can hold. So what made it so intense? It had a tall unknown height and a very tight circular 25-foot tall loop, and at the same time, this was before the technology of upstop wheels, so the only thing that kept the rider safe was the gravity of the loop. This ride operated from 1895 to an unknown time. For our number 2 spot, we have what is quite possibly the most well-known and controversial roller coaster of all time. This was the Cyclone at Crystal Beach in Ontario. This operated from 1926 to 1946. It was definitely very innovative at the time and maybe a little too ahead of its time. Very similar to the airplane coaster, this ride focused a lot on low to the ground pacing. And this ride's pacing was so intense that a lot of people ended up coming off with headaches and bruises and very minor injuries. It is undoubtable that this ride was super intense. Looking at the videos of the ride and the renderings, this ride had very low to the ground turns, very similar to a ride like Intimidator 305. Now, that's all fun and games, but when I think about it, this had old 1920s profiling. So imagine a ride like, let's say, Jackrabbit at Kennywood with the layout of Intimidator 305. This is exactly what that was. Crystal Beach Cyclone is usually number 1 on many people's lists, but today I wanted to shine a spotlight on a completely different coaster, a roller coaster that is usually forgotten about. This is the giant Skyrocket at the former Venice Park in Houston, Texas. Now, there were a lot of wooden coasters built back in the day, especially with lots of airtime, but this roller coaster might have had a little too much. This ride was 110 feet tall, which was very tall for the 1920s, and had a drop of 90 feet. This ride had a very steep drop. I mean, look at this picture right here. This was the ride's drop, and to look at it, it looked almost 90 degrees. And with the minimal restraints of yesteryear, it had almost 7,000 feet supposedly of wooden coaster airtime, and it was said to be crazy ejector airtime. This ride also supposedly had 2 lift hills. So a steep drop, followed by one of the craziest and longest wooden roller coasters in the world, definitely puts this at the top spot on this list. To summarize it, just imagine a ride like El Toro at Great Adventure, with the restraints of Phoenix at Knoebels. Anyways, that was my video talking about these roller coasters from the past. What do you think about these rides? If you were to ride any coaster on this list, which one would it have been? I hope you learned something from this video, and I hope you like, comment, and subscribe, and click the link in the description for social media accounts and merchandise. Anyways, until next time, this is Cedar Flags, and I'll see you all later.